It started on what was supposed to be a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was inside, catching up on some chores, when my phone buzzed with a neighbor's text that instantly made my stomach drop. "Hey, someone's in your backyard," looked like Karen's. "Son." I rushed outside, and, sure enough, there he was, Karen's 20-year-old son. Completely uninvited, soaking wet, panicking in my pool like he had no idea how he even got there. I had no clue how long he'd been in the water, and honestly, it looked like he was seconds away from drowning. Now, let me pause and give you some context. Karen is the self-appointed queen of our HOA. You know, the type knows. It's always peeking through her blinds and constantly nitpicking about everyone else's yard while her own mailbox is hanging on by a thread. Her son, no job, no school, and definitely no business being on my property. Yet somehow, after I helped pull him out of the pool, called for medical assistance, and made sure he was okay, she turned around and sued me. Yep, sued me. Claimed it was my fault her grown, jobless son trespassed into my backyard, went into my pool without permission, and nearly drowned. Her argument: I didn't have a visible enough warning sign. Or some nonsense about not having a double-locked gate, completely ignoring the fact that he had to climb over my fence to even get in. What's worse is how fast the HOA started backing her up, as if they'd been waiting for a reason to come after me. Suddenly, I was being hit with violation letters, fines, and threats about unsafe conditions. But here's where it gets even crazier. Because what I found on my security footage changed everything. And trust me, you're going to want to see it so after I got over the shock of being sued for someone else's mistake. I decided to go through the security footage just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I have a couple of cameras around my backyard, mostly because of the rising number of package thefts. Not because I ever thought I'd need to catch a neighbor's kid breaking in. But when I sat down and started watching the playback, what I saw honestly left me speechless. It wasn't just a random moment of poor judgment. Karen's son had been in my backyard before, not once, but at least 3 different times. One time he was poking around near my shed. Another, he was hanging out by the pool fully dressed, just sitting on a chair like it was his own place. The creepiest part, he wasn't alone in one of those clips. Someone was with him, but I couldn't quite make out who it was. The footage was grainy, and the second person kept their face away from the camera at that point. The whole situation flipped from being a bizarre misunderstanding to something that felt a lot more calculated. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on here. Why was he sneaking into my yard in the first place? And who was with him that night? And here's where Karen comes back into it. She'd always had this weird energy toward meal-forly friendly 1 minute, then passive-aggressive emails the next. She once sent a notice to the HOA board about the unapproved color of my garden chairs. If you can believe that, this lawsuit, it felt personal, like it was meant to shut me up or distract me from something bigger. I didn't know what, not yet. But the more I dug, the more it seemed like this whole trespassing incident was just the surface of something a lot deeper. The next few days were a whirlwind. I was juggling the lawsuit, talking to an attorney, and trying to keep calm while the HOA kept piling on citations, none of which made any real sense. They started fining me for things like unauthorized landscaping changes and non-uniform fencing, even though nothing had changed in years. It felt less like rule enforcement and more like targeted harassment. And the weird part, Karen's name kept popping up in those email threads, CC'd on almost every complaint. Like she was behind it all. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the image of her son sitting in my backyard like it was normal. Something about it didn't add up, so I went back through more footage, digging into older clips, just to be sure. That's when I noticed a pattern. He'd been coming in during the afternoons, always on days when I wasn't home. Always alone, except for that one time. Started wondering what exactly was he doing there. Nothing had been stolen, but I began to think maybe it wasn't about taking anything. Maybe he was looking for something, or even planting something. To make things more complicated, another neighbor, Tom, who lives across the street, casually mentioned that Karen had been complaining to the HOA board about me for months. He said she'd accused me of endangering the community because I refused to put a cover over my pool. That same neighbor also let it slip that Karen's son had been caught sneaking around another house a few blocks over earlier this year. But the owners didn't press charges after Karen promised it would never happen again. That was the first real clue that this might be bigger than just a backyard trespassing incident. Maybe this wasn't the first time she turned things around to protect her son. And if so, what else had been swept under the rug while the rest of us were following the rules? All of a sudden, it wasn't just about my pool or the bogus lawsuit anymore. It was about uncovering what Karen might really be hiding at this point. My frustration turned into obsession. I couldn't sleep right. I couldn't focus on work. Every moment was spent thinking about how someone could trespass on my property, almost drown in my pool, and somehow I'm the one being dragged through the mud. I was getting letters from the HOA almost daily now, and the legal threats from Karen's lawyer were getting more aggressive. She was trying to paint me as careless, irresponsible, even dangerous. But I knew what I saw on that footage, and I had a gut feeling this wasn't just some panicked mom looking out for her kid. This felt like a setup. I started digging deeper. I went door to door, talking to neighbors I barely knew, and sure enough, stories started pouring in. One neighbor said she'd seen Karen's son wandering around her backyard last summer, but didn't think much of it at the time. Another told me Karen once tried to get their trampoline removed by claiming it was a safety risk to neighborhood children. Slowly, a pattern was forming. Karen had been targeting homeowners who didn't bend to her will, and those who pushed back. They all had one thing in common: mysterious complaints, HOA violations out of nowhere, and pressure to either fix things or face legal consequences. But what really shook me was when I got a message from a former HOA board member who had quietly stepped down a few months earlier. He didn't say much in writing, just that he didn't feel right about how things were being handled and suggested I look into how Karen's son ended up on my property that day. That one comment set everything into motion. I started reviewing every angle of the security footage, frame by frame. And that's when I noticed something I had missed before. Just seconds before Karen's son appears on camera at my fence, a shadow moves behind my garage, right near the gate. It wasn't him. It was someone else. Someone who clearly didn't want to be seen. My blood ran cold. Because if what I was starting to suspect was true, then this entire lawsuit, every fine, every accusation, it wasn't just about HOA drama or pool safety. It was something much more calculated, something that had been in motion long before I even knew what was happening. And the craziest part? I was about to find out exactly who had been helping him get in. I couldn't stop staring at the screen. That shadow behind the garage didn't move like someone just passing through. It was cautious, slow, like whoever it was knew exactly where the cameras were and stayed just outside their reach. The timing lined up perfectly, just seconds before Karen's son entered the pool area. I rewound, played it again, and then again, trying to catch any clue. That's when something clicked. The shape of the figure, the slight limp in there. It looked familiar, too familiar, and suddenly it hit me. It looked exactly like Jeff, the HOA vice president. Now, Jeff and I weren't exactly friends, but he'd always acted neutral, kept to himself, stayed out of drama. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Jeff and Karen had been close for years, ways backing each other up in HOA meetings, always voting in sync. And if he was the one behind my garage that day, then this wasn't just about trespassing anymore. It meant someone on the HOA board might have helped. Karen's son break into my property. I started going back through the HOA notices and emails. And I found something odd. Jeff had submitted the safety complaint about my pool 2 days before the trespassing incident. At the time, it just looked like more HOA noise. But now, it felt like a setup. Like they were building a paper trail to make it seem like I was negligent, just in case something happened. And now something had. I couldn't prove it yet. But the pieces were falling into place. The fake complaints, the sudden wave of fines, the lawsuit, and now this shadow in the footage, it all pointed to something bigger than a nosy neighbor. I started to wonder, was this a personal vendetta? Or was there something deeper they were trying to cover up? Because just when I thought I was finally connecting the dots, something else happened that completely changed the game. I got an envelope in my mailbox, no return address, no name, just a flash drive inside, and what I found on it was something I was never supposed to see. I held the flash drive in my hand for a long minute, debating whether I should even plug it in. No note, no clue who sent it, just a plain black drive dropped into my mailbox like some kind of warning, or maybe a clue. My gut told me I had to see what was on it. So I took a deep breath, plugged it into my laptop, and opened the only file inside. It was a video, grainy, clearly from a hidden camera, but the audio was crystal clear. The first voice was Karen's. She was in her backyard, pacing and talking on the phone. I didn't recognize who she was speaking to, but what she said made my stomach turn. It's taken care of. Jeff made sure the gate latch was loose before the kid went over. If anything happens, it's on the homeowner. That'll shut him up for good. I paused the video. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not only did Karen know her son was going to trespass, she planned it with Jeff's help. This whole thing had been orchestrated to make it look like I was negligent. The lawsuit, the HOA violations, everything, they weren't just retaliation. They were part of a setup. I sent the footage straight to my attorney and called a meeting. With the HOA board, I showed them everything, the security footage, the strange timeline, and now the flash drive video. At first, there was silence. Then Jeff stood up, red-faced, and stormed out of the room. Karen, on the other hand, tried to play it off, said it was edited, fake, out of context. But it was too late. The damage was done. Within a week, the lawsuit was dropped and the HOA launched an internal review. Karen was asked to step down. Jeff, he quietly resigned and vanished from the neighborhood. I thought that was the end of it. It finally felt like I could breathe again, but about a month later, I got a call from Tom, the neighbor across the street. "Hey," he said cautiously, "you might want to check your backyard camera. Karen's son was out there again last night. Just standing at your fence. Not doing anything. Just staring." And that's when I realized maybe the game wasn't over after all. When I reviewed the camera footage that Tom warned me about. Sure enough, there he was. Karen's son standing just outside my fence in the middle of the night, not saying a word, just staring into my yard. But this time, I didn't panic. I saved the clip, contacted the police, and filed an official trespassing report. They spoke with him and his mother, making it clear that any further incidents would lead to real consequences. Since then, I haven't seen him near my property again. After the HOA fallout, the neighborhood shifted. A few other residents came forward with their own story-spetty violations, unexplained fines, even pressure to vote certain ways at board meetings. With Karen and Jeff both out, a new group of neighbors stepped up to reform the HOA. The tone changed. People started talking again, helping each other out, and looking out for one another the way a community should. It felt like we all took back our homes. As for me, I upgraded my security system, replaced the old fence with a taller one, and made sure every gate was reinforced and locked. But more importantly, I learned to trust my instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. And sometimes, standing your ground is the only way to stop people from walking all over you. So if you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA, manipulative neighbor, or found yourself on the wrong end of someone else's lies, just know you're not alone. Keep records, stay calm, and don't let fear make you silent. What started as a nightmare in my own backyard turned into a wake-up call for the entire block, and to this day, I still wonder if I hadn't checked that footage. How far would they have taken it?